Before we begin, I would first like to thank James Harden. It has been a very boring few weeks in the NBA atmosphere. I have been sitting in my room, bored out of my mind, trying to find something basketball related to talk about that's interesting, and he's given us a lot of material. So if you haven't seen it already, there is a video of James Harden in China where he's doing some promo for Adidas, where he is publicly calling Daryl Morey a liar and says that he will not play for any organization that Daryl Morey is a part of and that he will not be showing up to training camp. Now, there's a lot of speculation going around because we don't know exactly what he is upset about, but we have some very good educated guesses. As with many things when it comes to players and teams arguing, it comes down to money. So James Harden last summer restructured his contract to sign a 2 years, roughly $70 million deal, which paid him around $35 per year. And this was a pay cut from the amount he would have gotten had he not restructured his deal. The Sixers used that extra money, that $15 million or so that he sacrificed, to sign, I believe, PJ Tucker and Daniel House. They were able to get both of them on the team. Fast forward to this summer when free agency happens, James Harden reportedly demands a trade. He is unhappy, but at the same time, he opts into his player contract. So he opts into playing for the Sixers, but also demands a trade out of Philadelphia. And then after James Harden requested a trade, the Sixers were starting to work to trade him somewhere, mostly to the Los Angeles Clippers, where James Harden wanted to go. And it was a team that actually could put together something resembling a package for Harden. But clearly, Daryl Morey and the Sixers front office staff were not impressed with the offers that they got. And so they decided, hey, we can't find a good trade for you, so we're just not going to trade you. You got to just play for us next season. And so the educated speculation is that the Philadelphia 76ers and Daryl Morey under the table promised James Harden that he would be compensated for taking a pay cut last summer, either in the form of just getting a bigger contract this summer, getting a longer contract, and they backtracked on that. So it is not unusual for Daryl Morey to propose an under-the-table agreement to compensate James Harden, and it is not unusual for Harden to accept that. We don't know how often promises like this get broken. I assume they get broken more than we think. It just so happens that this time it's happening to James Harden, who is not only a star player in the NBA, a household name, but he's also one of the more dramatic superstars. And he has a certain way of getting what he wants. At the end of the day, the NBA is a business. And like in any other realm of professional life, if you don't have something in writing, it is not legally binding. Daryl Morey doesn't work for James Harden. Daryl Morey works for the 76ers and the 76ers ownership. His job is to make sure the Sixers have the brightest future possible and are best able to contend to win championships. They have deemed that it is so crippling to pay James Harden too much money, they would rather cause all this drama and put a really bad stench on the franchise in the front office. There's a few things about the timeline of all of this that's a little bit weird to me, right? So James Harden, the moment he requests a trade out of Philadelphia, the same time that news broke, the news also broke that he opted into his player option for this season, which is $35 million. The fact that he opted in means that James Harden, probably on the advice of his agent as well, understands that on the open market, nobody is going to give him the amount of money he's looking for. Nobody except for Philadelphia. And the only reason Philadelphia would do it is because they promised they would give him more money last summer. But especially since recently we heard reports that when Ime Udoka got the coaching job in Houston, he told their front office, hey, I don't want James Harden here on my team. Pretty much the biggest contender to actually give James Harden a big contract, a team that would want him and that actually had the cap space to give him a lot of money, especially since we now know that Houston was never really on the table for James Harden. It is very likely that his whole idea to opt in is just a realistic business decision. So then that makes you think, if James Harden knows he can't get more money anywhere else, why does he want to be traded anyways? And at the end of the day, this comes down to emotions because he's just upset. He's upset with Daryl Morey. He's upset with the Sixers, and he's hurt. And I'm guilty of this myself in the sense that as somebody who talks about basketball a lot, oftentimes because I'm an outsider, I don't work for an NBA team, I never have, the human element of negotiations, of contracts, gets lost on me sometimes because I'm not in that office talking to these actual people. James Harden is clearly just very hurt by the situation. especially coming from Daryl Morey. This is not just him against some random front office GM that he has no personal relationship with. No, this is Daryl Morey, the guy who traded for him and brought him to Houston, the guy who made his career in Houston. I'm not saying James Harden wouldn't have been a great player anywhere else. Like, I'm sure he would have been fine. But Daryl Morey chose James Harden to be the franchise cornerstone for Houston for half a decade. And they did some really, really good things and put together some really good teams. And James Harden won some really nice awards and put up a lot of big numbers. But I'm also going to be honest with you guys. Even though in my head, when I think through the timeline of events that happened, logically speaking, I actually lean more towards James Harden's side, where I feel like he has a legitimate case. But the fact that it's James Harden makes me not want to have any sympathy for him. And in fact, I don't really have any sympathy for him, because this is now the third team he's been on, Houston, Brooklyn, and now Philadelphia, where he has demanded a trade in a very atypical, unprofessional manner. At some point, your track record as a human being, as a professional, matters a lot. And I am simply not willing to give James Harden the benefit of the doubt. I am not willing to believe that James Harden is truly that much of a victim because of his track record, because he's now done this for 3 teams. Now, why did I title this video, James Harden is Playing with Fire? I want to show you guys something. So on a podcast, I heard somebody mention, a reporter mention, that in the CBA, there is a very specific paragraph section that mentions the possibility of a player refusing to go to training camp and refusing to show up to play. And so I went to the CBA and I found the actual document, the actual language that talks about what happens to players that actually withhold their services. So I'm going to pull that up for you guys right now. This is in the newly negotiated 2023 NBA collective bargaining agreement effective July 1st, 2023. In Article 6, Section 3, titled Withholding Services, a player who withholds playing services called for by a player contract for more than 30 days after the start of the last season covered by his player contract shall be deemed not to have completed his player contract by rendering the playing services called for thereunder. Accordingly, such a player shall not be a veteran free agent and shall not be entitled to negotiate or sign a player contract with any other professional basketball team unless and until the team for which the player last played expressly agrees otherwise. Okay, there's a lot of technical legal jargon in there, but essentially this is what this paragraph means. James Harden is in the last year of his contract. Starting with training camp, which marks the official beginning of the NBA season, which is October 3rd. Starting at October 3rd, the beginning of training camp, James Harden has 30 days to actually show up and fulfill his contract as a player. Otherwise, he will not be a free agent even when his contract expires next summer. So this is not even mentioning the fact that he's going to get fined and that his salary is going to get docked for not playing in games. So we saw this already happen in Philadelphia with Ben Simmons. Even if James Harden is like, you know what? I am so upset with the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't care if you guys fine me till I don't make any money this year. I will just not play for you guys and I will play for somebody else next summer. He can't do that. Legally speaking. I mean, I practically speaking, you never know. But legally speaking, he doesn't have the right to do that. In fact, he can't sign with any professional basketball team. Any. In the whole world. This is not just NBA. Any professional basketball team. This clause did not apply to Ben Simmons because Ben Simmons, when he was doing all that drama with the Sixers, was not in the last year of his contract. He had multiple years left. Now, does this mean that actually James Harden has zero leverage in this situation? No. Because again, there's a big human element to the NBA and to contracts. All these players, they're all friends with each other. They all talk to each other. They all tell each other how teams operate and everything. So the fact that the Sixers have openly reneged on a promise really hurts their image as a team. It affects their ability to sign players in the future. It also affects their ability to negotiate with their current players. So this is going to get really messy. And the reason why I say James Harden is playing with fire is because of this exactly. Because he does not have any real legal basis for pulling this heavy leverage play that he's pulling right now. Given that the Damian Lillard situation is going on, given that the NBA already sent out a memo warning Damian Lillard, I think NBA owners are on high alert and that they're going to be fed up with this kind of talk. At some point, there's going to be some reckoning. And James Harden making a public video statement like this is a really bad look for the owners. Under normal situations, I would guess that James Harden would just get traded. Because as a team, for the sake of team chemistry, for the sake of consistency and the team culture and everything, you just can't have a guy like him on the team when he clearly doesn't want to be there at all. But given the current climate caused by the Damian Lillard trade, I wouldn't be surprised if something different happens. If James Harden loses this fight. Because seriously, he might have gone a little bit too far this time. Hopefully we get more James Harden news, because that's the only thing that's happening in basketball right now that is interesting or worth talking about. Unless Dame gets traded. Hopefully that happens eventually. Okay. I'll see you next time.